I can't defend it. Can you defend it? Hand on heart with all these Palestinians being slaughtered?
I laud and applaud them every day who have set a standard that will be virtually impossible for any Western country to match in a future war. This is a genocide that could be alleged genocide that could be stopped at any point should the Hamas government decide to release the hostages.
To be proud of slaughtering 20,000 children, this is not human. I'm really sorry. Only the Nazis spoke like this.
Dozens of people get shot and killed literally every single day, as they're waiting for food. No, I'm not gonna let you filibuster, bitch. I find it so unbelievably evil.
Is Israel justified in defending the Druze in Syria?
Oh, absolutely not. And I don't believe for a second that they are. We're really supposed to believe that that's what's motivating them, yet we've seen 1,000 times more footage coming right next door in Gaza, and that hasn't motivated them to stop.
Hello， 大家好，我是利恩。我们都知道，从2023年10月7号哈马斯偷袭了以色列以来呢，时至今日以哈战争仍然没有停歇。我在之前《战争》这部影片提到过说，我对战争的看法就是现代战争，我绝对不轻易选边站，哪怕主角是以色列也是一样。那么我从一开始呢，并不反对以色列对哈马斯进行人质救援，或者说军事上的反击。但是我为什么不轻易选边？就是因为我不确定战争的走向，它是不是合乎一开始的道德原则，不愿意去评判绝对的对错。为什么？就连我认为哈马斯对以色列在10月7号的攻击行动，它明明确确是一场恐怖活动、恐怖战争。那么以色列，我支持都有绝对的正当性，为了解救人质，可以去用军事力量去跟哈马斯宣战。这点我都完全的认同，完全的支持。可是我不可能完全100%的去支持以色列到底，就是因为我不能够确保的是，以色列的每一场战争是否一定都完全公义。我只有在道德上面，我支持以色列的反制行为，可是我无法去支持全部战争形态，是因为我不知道。那我也要分享一个观点给大家，就是我不知道什么地方，就是我不知道在这个所谓军事反制行为当中，你有没有报复心理。而目前以色列呢，已经打了快整整2年过去了，时至7月最新的一个情势呢，已经出现了严重的饥荒问题。这个人为造成的大规模饥荒，是我现在高度关切，却又不得不说，始终像是在雾里看花一样，一直在评估确定到底真相如何。为什么？因为一来是加萨走廊里面呢，严重缺乏所谓的战地记者。过去许多的媒体的资讯都是透过外包给巴勒斯坦的记者来提供所谓相关内部的新闻画面。可是由于现在内部的巴勒斯坦记者已经死了170多名了所以现在要能够确认到底真相为何，变得越来越困难。那这里面就引起了一个我认为每个人都会关注的一件事情，特别我也希望基督徒们好好的去思考一个问题，那就是当初哈马斯所劫持的人质，到目前以色列所进行的军事反击或者说军事制裁，有没有出于其他的目的，还是真的只是单纯的为了要把所谓的人质救出呢？这就是我今天要请大家跟我一起一步一步来厘清的真相。我今天会利用 Piers Morgan Uncensored 在7月23号的节目，针对现在加萨走廊的严重问题，特别来宾展开的大辩论，在这里面我会补充我查找到的资料，但是我必须说，这仍然是一个求知求真的过程，所以我也希望大家跟我一起抱持着求真的态度，不要轻易的去做一个定论。
你说的对，你说的对，
就让我们一起来好好的探究，到底以色列现在想干嘛？我们一起来看 ，Let's go。
The UK's Foreign Secretary has described the current scenes in Gaza as sickening. 28 countries yesterday condemned Israel's, quote, horrifying attacks on Palestinians queuing for food. Pope Leo is demanding a ceasefire, expressing sorrow at what he calls barbarity. Far from finalizing a ceasefire, Israel has launched a massive new air and ground offensive on central Gaza, and every day, more Gazans are being killed as they try to get food and water. 21 died in a crush on Friday. 39 were killed in gunfire near aid sites on Saturday. 67 were killed in gunfire as they waited for UN aid trucks on Sunday. Fewer than a quarter of Americans now say that Israel's actions are fully justified. 74% of Israelis told a recent poll they support a ceasefire which returns the hostages. Well, later on, we'll tackle the vexed debate about when a war becomes a genocide with Dave Smith. We'll begin with a simple question. How can Benjamin Netanyahu be stopped? Joining me is executive producer and host of The Young Turks, Anna Kasparian, the PragerU commentator and pro-Israel activist, Shabbos Kestenbaum, and the journalist and commentator for Haaretz, Gideon Levy. Well, welcome to all of you. Anna Kasparian, I mean, it's an important question, isn't it? As most of the world now watches in ongoing horror of what is happening in Gaza, which seems to have just gone way beyond any defensible proportionality to the events of October the 7th, horrendous though those were. But who is going to stop Netanyahu? It doesn't appear that President Trump is minded to do that. And if the Americans don't, I don't know who can.
Well, you do make a great point here, Piers Morgan, and it's the same point that I actually made on this very program not too long ago. The only person who has the ability to use his leverage to get Netanyahu to act differently is President Donald Trump. And for whatever reason, he seems ready and willing to supply arms to Israel, get dog-walked by the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And quite frankly, not only is his actions and his enabling of these actions and this genocide in Gaza shameful for the American people, since we're being forced to fund it and pay for it, it's also embarrassing for the American people. We'd like to live in a sovereign country that has a government that represents the best interests of the American people. Instead, Donald Trump, along with other government officials, are facilitating the theft of our taxpayer money to buy bombs and other weapons that terrorize, slaughter, and maim innocent people, women and children in Gaza. It's unacceptable.
Okay, Shabbos Kestenbaum, I find it really difficult to see how any Israeli or Jew, frankly, around the world thinks that anything that's now happening in Gaza is going to make it more secure to be an Israeli or Jew. Because all I can see is the opposite happening, that there's just increasing rage, particularly in the Arab world, but also in the wider world. We're seeing it now with many allies of Israel. You know, I defended Israel's right to defend itself for a long time and got attacked for it all the time by people supportive of the Palestinian position. But I can't defend it now. Can you defend it?
这边我要说一下哈，我跟 Piers Morgan 有相同的感受。之前我们在以伊战争当中，我也详细做了好几部影片，探讨了以伊之间过去历史的恩怨。我也公开的表示说，我并不反对以色列在已知伊朗铀浓缩已经达到400公斤 60% 的情况之下，率先的去袭击伊朗的核设施，这是按照过去以色列背景主义所强调的保护以色列的方式。但是呢，我之前也被人认为是在帮以色列洗地，所以呢，我也尊重并且呢接受部分网友对我的批评。因为本来我就支持捍卫以色列它的自卫权，在历史过去来讲，以色列率先袭击的事件，对伊拉克以及对叙利亚呢，都证明了是成功且有效防堵的。但是这并不表示我对以哈战争呢，抱持着支持到底的态度。以色列的目的是要人质的释放，这个人质现在只剩下大约150人，可是加萨走廊的人民已经死了数以万计。这个才是我们应该要好好去思考的问题，就是以色列他到底想要做什么？这个不合比例的代价，真的还能够符合所谓救援人质这样子的一个理由吗？
Can you honestly, hand on heart, defend what is happening on a daily basis with all these Palestinians being slaughtered at food sites? And don't just say it's all Hamas, because it's not.
Sure. So let's be clear. I do not defend the Israel Defense Forces. I laud and applaud them every day, who have set a standard that will be virtually impossible for any Western country to match in a future war. In a dense urban environment, Israel has one of the lowest combatant to civilian ratios of modern warfare. Israel has actually given more aid into Gaza than pre-October 7th. This is a genocide that could be alleged genocide that could be stopped at any point should the Hamas government decide to release the hostages and surrender. This point has been made very clear by Benjamin Netanyahu the Prime Minister of Israel. This has been made clear by Benny Gantz. This has been made clear by Gideon Sa'ar. This war can end the minute Hamas surrenders and returns the hostages. In fact, there's a ceasefire deal on the table right now that Adam Boehler, who's the U.S. envoy for hostages, and Steve Witkoff have repeatedly offered to Hamas. That deal is on the table and has been on the table for the last 2 weeks. The only party that has rejected that ceasefire is Hamas. So if you truly want the killing to stop, if you truly want the war to end, if you truly want there to be a ceasefire, then you would use your platform. We would use campus activists to immediately put pressure on Hamas to surrender. The pressure should not be on Israel. Israel is engaging in a defensive war. I am proud of what Israel has done. Certainly, innocent civilians are being killed, which is a tragedy. But we do not judge the efficacy, the validity, or the justification on a war on how many civilians are being killed. That is not how you judge a war. No war has ever been judged. In the Korean War, 3 million civilians were killed. In Iraq, more than 500,000 civilians were killed. In the Syrian civil war, 300,000 civilians were killed. Civilian death is always a terrible thing, but is a consequence.
Can you name me?
刚刚这个支持以色列的代表夏博斯呢，我认为他有2点是值得我们去思考的。第一个就是他居然说出了一句：假设以色列好这种所谓种族清洗，就算这种据称的种族清洗，他说要停止，其实很简单啊，那就是哈马斯投降。不就可以停止了吗？那夏博士这样说，其实变成说他并不完全的否认现在以色列的行为，哪怕不一定完全100%贴切，但是他也并不对所谓种族清洗这样的一个字眼呢，感觉到是完全的错误。那我就要请大家想想看，假设我们如果说以色列他真的是有意要发动种族清洗的话，那你会支持只要在哈马斯这种恐怖集团没有完全无条件投降，并且交还所有的人质以前，那么以色列就有其正当性可以做种族清洗吗？我想这个是第一个很值得思考的问题，不是吗？那第二点就是哈博斯他提到说，以色列本来就有权利进行所谓防御的军事攻击，不过这一点已经并不符合现在的以哈情况。现在以哈情况事实上是压倒性的，以色列不断的在对加萨走廊这边做轰炸，以及所谓的抓出哈马斯这个摧毁哈马斯的军人也好，等等等等。那没有错，哈马斯我也同意，他确实躲在平民当中。可现在比较合情合理的说法，反而是想办法对哈马斯做全面性的清扫，而不是在做所谓的防御了。我同意。战争本来就残酷，我们不能看平民的死伤人数，但是问题就是以色列是不是单纯的只是因为没有办法抓到躲藏在平民的哈马斯，就因此也滥杀破纪的无辜呢？我们继续看下去。
All right, Shabbos, can you name me a recent war since World War II where the proportion of children in civilian deaths has been this high? Can you just give me one?
I just did. The Syrian Civil War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, any battle in Iraq, whether it was
You believe
Mosul,
the proportion of children to civilians killed was higher than it is right now in Gaza?
I just told you all of those wars, and you can fact check me all you would like. The reality is, and this is why you have John Spencer on repeatedly from West Point, Israel has one of the lowest combatant to civilian ratios in modern warfare. They're operating in a dense
but I've also had lots of military people who don't agree with it.
Where's your decency, man? Where is your decency? Seriously, where is your decency? Do you not see the videos? Do you not see the starving children? 19 kids died of starvation over the last 48 hours. Where is your decency? I get that you're Jewish. I get that this is about your identity. I get that you want to defend your people. But sometimes you can't defend the indefensible. How many people need to die for you to be pleased with this slaughter campaign that's currently going on? How many? Tell me. When is it enough for you? And no one is buying the lie that that the genocide would end if Hamas releases the hostages. I'm not going to believe for a second that Israel gives a damn about the hostages because they've been bombing the Gaza Strip. They've been blocking humanitarian aid from entering the Gaza Strip. That not only impacts Palestinians who are being slaughtered by Israel, but it also obviously is going to impact the hostages. No one is buying this dog and pony show, okay? It's so obvious what Israel is doing here. They're even bombing Syria because they allegedly care about the Druze. It's not about the Druze. By the way, that Syrian civil war, Israel was part of that proxy war that you have Israel part of, the United States part of, Turkey a part of. All sorts of countries were involved in that proxy war. It was absolutely horrific. And now, of course, Israel is taking full advantage of the situation to annex more land from Syria again. But
Well,
anyway,
okay.
continue. Tell me where your human decency
Well,
is.
I have to say, as someone who grew up on the far left, actually watching you, Anna, and Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks, it's very, very sad for me personally to see just how far gone politically you have become.
I don't care.
Audible discharge is not, excuse me, stop interrupting. Audible discharge is not a usurpation of a coherent argument. You simply saying that I'm using my Jewish identity. This has nothing to do with my Jewish identity. It has to do with politics.
It is
has
about
to do
your
with
Jewish
war.
identity.
It has to do,
Literally
okay,
everyone in the international community sees this for what it is, and you can't? You can't? How many people need to die?
这边我帮这个女来宾安娜呢补充几句。安娜她确实过去在2007年到2023年的时候，她是明确的左派，但是在2024年的时候，她呢对民主党非常的失望，所以她宣布脱离了民主党，转成独立人士。那2024年到2025年，事实上她批评左派或者说自由主义的进步派的身份政治跟取消文化 （cancel culture） 呢，其实批评的非常强烈。好，而且她对于所谓犯罪还有游民的问题呢，她是持更好保守的立场。虽然安娜的政治光谱并不是中间偏右的保守主义，但是我认为安娜她目前确实比较偏中间派。
You know, again, you are double my age. I encourage you to use the decorum of a 7-year-old and stop interrupting. You interrupt every other guest. Kindly just shut up.
No.
Now, here's the issue.
I don't care about decorum when we're talking about endless
All right, but you must let him answer.
That we're paying for.
All right, but Anna, look, you must let him answer.
Okay, go ahead.
So again, this question of how many civilians, no one asked that question in World War I. No one asked that question in World War II. No one asked that question in the Korean War. No one asked that question in the Vietnam War. No one asked that question in Iraq and Afghanistan, because you do not judge the efficacy, the validity, or the justification of a war depending on how many civilians are killed. If you truly want to end the killing of civilians, then I would urge you to use your platform and use the Young Turks to advocate for a ceasefire, the expurgation, the dismantlement of Hamas.
Don't tell me what to use the Young Turks for.
All right, let me go. All right, let me go to Gideon.
Give a voice to the voiceless, to the powerless.
Okay.
Not to people who have all the power in the world and use it to slaughter innocent people.
Okay, let me come to Gideon to be waiting. Let me come to Gideon, please. It seems to me the problem with those like Shabbos trying to defend all this and saying how pleased they are with it all is that you've also got people like Smodrich in the Israeli government, the finance minister, one of the key members of that government, very openly talking now about a form of ethnic cleansing, where all the Palestinians, in his words, would be cleansed from Gaza. And this is clearly, it seems to me, becoming ever more obviously what the bigger plan may be here, which is that actually Israel's defense forces make it so uninhabitable, Gaza, by just blowing it all to pieces, that actually they say, well, you can't go back and live there to the Palestinians. You're going to have to all leave. And then they leave, and then Israel takes it over. I think that's exactly what people like Smodrich want, and that is not a form of self-defense to what happened on October the 7th. It's an ethnic cleansing of a population out of their homeland. What do you say to that?
这个施莫德里奇呢是目前以色列的财政部长，他本身是反对巴勒斯坦建国哈，而且他最大的争议呢就是他曾经言辞上面表示说如果饿死了加萨的200万人呢，那这个事情呢，也可能是符合正义道德的。那个时候就引发欧盟跟美国的强烈谴责。那他一直支持着以色列用军事的方式来控制加萨，当然他也支持提供人道援助。可是呢，他呢是认为说加萨呢就应该要推动所谓自主移民的政策，因为加萨走廊过去很尴尬嘛，刚刚好在以色列建国的时候，偏偏呢就变成巴勒斯坦，一边在约旦的这个西侧，这边呢还可以达到自己独立自治管理。那加萨这边呢刚好被以色列包围起来嘛，所以变成加萨的人民他又是巴勒斯坦，可是他却必须要仰赖以色列这边供水供电。所以斯莫特里奇呢他就表示说，这个巴勒斯坦人呢，如果真的觉得加萨待不下去，那么我们反而鼓励你就自行离开加萨。那这样子的一个说法是不是反映了你背后的动机跟想法？就是你不是以真的哈马斯所挟持的人质救援为主，而是你有可能是计划性的想要借着以哈的冲突呢，逐步的实现加萨走廊就干脆慢慢的归到以色列的国土范围当中。这样子我也不需要还要提供你水电嘛，对吧？二来就是你加萨这边呢，讲好听一点就是以后不会始终处于被哈马斯这种军政府统治的贫困状态，对吧？可是这样子就等于以色列是有意想要侵占加萨走廊这一片领土咯。那这样子 值得我们思考的一个点就是，如果以色列像斯莫特里奇他是这种狼子野心的想法的话，那你觉得这该不该支持呢 ？OK。
Unfortunately, the problem is not Smotrich. Unfortunately, the problem is Israeli society, which is either supporting or quite passive and apathetical. Smotrich is the face of Israel, I'm afraid to say. He says loudly and in a very vulgar way things that you can understand from many, many other Israelis, maybe the majority, who sits at home, who doesn't watch anything of what's going on in Gaza, who has no interest in what's going on in Gaza, and sits, and then comes someone like our friend in the team now, who is even proud in it. Can you believe that a Jew, a human being, an American, can be proud of starvation, of mass murder, of genocide? I mean, this stage, really, here I remain speechless. I can understand if the Israeli propaganda tries to explain, to cover up, to spread lies, to talk about self-defense, to talk about killing Hamas, to talk about the fact that it's about Israel's security. But to be proud of what we are doing, to be proud of slaughtering 20,000 children, how can a human being get out those words out of his mouth? This is not human. I'm really sorry. Only the Nazis spoke like this. I repeat, only the Nazis were proud of mass killing and genocides.
好，那我要简单介绍一下最右边的这名来宾。好，他呢叫做吉恩利维，是一个犹太人，好，完全的正规血统的以色列人。但是呢，他比较特别的是，广泛被认为是以色列的左派人物。那这个并不代表他参与任何左派的政治团体，其实并没有。他自己呢，长期在国土报撰写专栏，对于以色列对巴勒斯坦的政策跟主张呢，他是偏比较尊重巴勒斯坦的人权，而且也支持巴勒斯坦可以自己建立自己的国家。所以呢，这个才被以色列的政府当局是比较归类在左派阵营的代表性人物。但是他认为他自己是一个完全正直爱国的以色列人，他说他因此才批判这个国家，他的使命是要让以色列人不能再说我不知道这句话，所以他一直相信说，除了国土报之外呢，其他的媒体是不会让他自由的发声的。好，当然以色列毕竟是民主国家，所以有多元不同的声音，好，都是可以听见的。
Okay, well, Shabbos, you should respond to that.
Sure, I'm certainly not proud of mass starvation because there isn't any. I'm proud of the fact that
hang on. The IDF literally, for 3 months, starved the population in a blockade. There was no secret about that. Everybody saw it for what it was. So I'm afraid you're just not right about that. They only recently ended that blockade. So they are starving the population, which is, by the way, a war crime if you do that.
Peters, do you know how many meals the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation
spare me all this. It's just crap. It's like when I did a list, honestly. Shabbos, I did a list, Shabbos. I did a list. Hang on.
To starve a population, why would you give them 85 million meals in the last month and a half?
I know. They're all overfed. I know.
There's more aid going into Gaza post-October 7th than pre-October 7th. I cannot name another war in modern warfare. And you know the problem, Shabbos? The besieged population is actually receiving aid from the enemy combatant. That is what I'm proud of.
It's amazing. Look, Shabbos, here's the thing. Unfortunately, you sound like the people who have started to defend the indefensible when it comes to what Israel's government is doing. And I'll tell you why. After all these attacks on Palestinians as they're queuing up for food, the IDF says basically the same thing. Either they were firing warning shots, or they felt they were being threatened by some people, or they've launched an inquiry or an investigation. And we never get the results of any of this. But in the meantime, 1,000 people who are desperately hungry and are queuing for food, even though you say they've got plenty of food, there are thousands stampeding for the small amounts of food that they can get their hands on, even though you say they're not hungry because you've overfed them, right? That all these people are just dropping dead. And it's got nothing to do with the fact the IDF are firing towards them, when everybody knows it does. And this is the problem when you defend the indefensible. It would have so much more credibility if the IDF just once said, you know what? We did. We shot at them, and like you said, you're very proud of everything they're doing. And if they were to proudly own this and explain why they need to shoot starving people who are stampeding for fragments of food, maybe we'd all take a lot more seriously the other claims they make.
关于主持人提到这件事情呢，是7月20号周日的时候，加萨卫生部的负责人瓦希德就向美联社表示说，当天呢，在发放人道物资的时候，以色列军方就突然发布紧急疏散命令，然后就朝着人群开枪，造成严重死亡。那最惨重的就是加萨北部地区，至少79人死亡，150多人受伤。在这一次攻击当中呢，以色列的军方就表示说，士兵在加萨北部物资发放地开枪是因为有人构成威胁。好，那以军也坦诚说造成部分死伤，但是认为加萨卫生部门所说的数字太夸张，因为现在主要对于加萨地区发放这个人道救援物资的是由加萨人道主义基金会 GHF 呢为主导。那联合国在2025年6月的时候就已经表示说，现在 GHF 已经成为了所谓死亡陷阱，指控以色列呢变成将食物武器化，而且在援助发放的时候开枪呢是构成了所谓战争罪。更早之前6月的时候呢，也是发生同样的事情，就是每次都到发放时间的时候，就会有试图前往领取的加上灾民呢被枪杀。所以他们现在就非常严重怀疑说，这个 GHF 只是在满足以色列的军事目的而已。光是到6月还不算7月20号呢，已经连续几周，总共有400多名的巴勒斯坦人都在前往领取食物的路上被以色列军方枪杀。所以加上人道主义基金会从他们开始运作以来，各个分发地点的周围就会出现一片混乱，然后死伤不断。我认为这个质疑绝对是合情合理的，因为第一个，这个情况就没有停过，而且以色列军方自己也没有完全否认这不是事实，只是对于人数的说法有出入。那问题就来了，如果你发放食物都会造成伤亡的话，这样子的人道救援确实失去了很大的意义。那是不是应该改由原本的联合国单位来发放？按照联合国儿童基金会指出，原本在加萨本来最早是由联合国来负责的，后来被以色列要求必须统一由以色列跟美国合作的这个民间团体加萨人道主义基金会来负责。在这个主导下呢，现在只剩下4个发放地点，而境外却有满坑满谷的物资呢，无法被运入加萨。
Why is the UN so anti-GHF?
We're not anti-GHF, Benny. We
I'm
are.
said,
No. You've asked me a question. Let me take this Let me be opportunistic and try to answer your question. We are not anti-GHF, right? We are for humanitarian aid. We've said it over and over again. The UN alone cannot handle the humanitarian needs. We want to be able to do our work to full capacity, which is not something we've been allowed to do. We ask others who are doing humanitarian aid or who are trying to do humanitarian aid, frankly, one could describe just food distribution, to do it in a way that doesn't put at risk the people they're trying to help. There are basic principles that are adopted by the General Assembly that are globally accepted by the humanitarian community of impartiality, of independence, of neutrality, and of humanity. We will not work with people who do not meet those standards.
Lazzarini, who heads a UN agency, calls to dismantle the GHF. So does Hamas. Why are you on the same side?
We are on the side of helping people in a way that does not get them killed. When you're running a militarized food distribution, when you're forcing people into barbed wire lined corridors, when you're pushing them to be near military checkpoints, it's a recipe for what is happening.
And the other point I'd make, Chavez, is when you now just tell me I'm talking nonsense and they're all overfed and no one's getting killed and it's all on Hamas. To this day, the Israeli government refuses to let any international media into Gaza. And it's not because of the quaint notion that they're worried about the safety of journalists, because they've killed over 200 Palestinian journalists. They don't care about the health and safety of journalists. And it's not their business to decide about the safety requirements of journalists. It's the business of the organizations that employ them. But until Israel's government allows foreign media into Gaza to verify its endless, in my opinion, utterly disingenuous statements, then no one should believe a word they're now saying. Because why should we? Why should we? Why should we believe anything that the Israeli government is saying about any of this when they don't want the world's media to see it? After October the 7th, what was the first thing they did? They brought the world's media into the kibbutzes to see the full horror of what Hamas did, to verify the truth. But they won't apply that same thinking to verifying the truth in Gaza. And as a journalist, I know why they don't want to do that. They don't want people to see the truth. They're hiding the truth. That enables them to lie with impunity and to discount any responsibility for anything they're doing. And if I sound angry about this, it's because I'm bloody angry about it. Because it's so obvious that they don't want people to see the truth. And you can sit here and you can say till you're blue in the teeth, there's nothing going on that's wrong. There's nothing to see here. It's all on Hamas. No one's starving anyone. No one's shooting anyone in food aids. No one's doing anything wrong. This is the most moral army in the world. Well, okay. So let the journalists in and we can see for ourselves just how true that all is.
So after listening to that disquisition, let me say this. You're certainly entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. I agree with you. The Israel Foreign Ministry and the Israel Defense Forces should let journalists like yourself, Piers, not only into Gaza, but also into the Kerem Shalom border crossing. So you can see with your own eyes, the way I have seen, the more than 800 humanitarian aid trucks that were going into Gaza on a daily basis. I never once said that
why
there's
are they
no
stampeding for food? If they're so overfed, why are they stampeding for food?
Piers, I defend you constantly. You are not an anti-Semite, obviously, but I do understand why people have trepidation coming on your show because they allow you to speak for 5 minutes, and the moment I try to make a point, you interrupt. So if you allow me just 2 minutes to make my point, and then you can tell me why.
Just make your point.
Okay.
Just make your point. Stop crying about it.
No, that's a valid thing to say. It's fine. I don't want to keep interrupting people. That's fine. Go on.
I appreciate it. Let me say as follows. I agree with you. Journalists should be allowed into Gaza. I imagine, though, the Israeli position is, well, we can't allow journalists into Gaza because if the accusations from individuals like Piers Morgan or Anna Kasparian is that we are killing journalists indiscriminately, and then journalists were to end up being killed because Gaza is an active war zone, you can imagine what that would do on the PR front. Never mind the fact that British military rule does not allow journalists into active combat zones. So what you are saying is we should apply a double standard to Israel, that they need to allow journalists into an active war zone, but no other Western country needs to follow the same procedures. Even with that double standard, I would concede that point. I agree journalists should be allowed in.
Now I'm so deeply convinced that there is a goal, a very clear goal. And the goal is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It is systematic, it is well planned.
Yes, we know the cornerstone is Christ alone, our hope now forever.